to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra, the Watchful. Today we are theorizing, we're talking about the idea that Rhaenys Targaryen is Sarella Sand.
Yeah, this is part 2 of our 4-part series here on Rhaenys Targaryen, who she could be. Is she still alive? So last time we were talking just about who is she? Who is Rhaenys Targaryen? She's the daughter of Rhaegar and Elia, believed to have been killed at the sack of King's Landing by Armory Lork under the orders of Tywin Lannister. Although it's possible she's still alive, there are so many other characters that are living through a disguise, through a glamour. Are they somebody? Are they somebody else? Just also we talked about the idea that she could still be alive. What would be the reasons behind that? And so today we're going to talk about the idea that she is Sarella Sand. That's who we would believe, if she's alive, is the strongest candidate for her to be who she could be.
Yeah, well, and so the idea is, we looked at like someone who was born in 280 AC. We know that Rhaenys was born in 280 AC. We tried to find someone else with Dornish features, who was also born in 280 AC. We made some interesting connections. But before we do that, when you look back in the histories, and you look for other Targaryens who might have been Dornish, or an alliance, I guess, between the Targaryens and Dorne, you will see, I think it's Daeron II, who is with Mariah Martell, and they end up having a son named Baelor Breakspear. And Baelor Targaryen is very much like Rhaenys Targaryen. He has Dornish features, and his sons even have Dornish features. But yet Baelor's brothers, all the way down to Maekar, they don't. They're very similar to their father. They have the traditional Targaryen features. So I guess it's just further proof that this can happen. This is something that does happen. When Rhaegar married Elia Martell, he has 2 children with her. One is Rhaenys Targaryen, who was about 3 or 4 years old, who looks Dornish, and his other son was not Dornish, right? Was more like his father, and very much embraced by Aerys and his grandmother. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just wanted to take a look here at Baelor Breakspear just a little bit to kind of give you somebody else who was Dornish. Just I'm going to describe a little bit about who he was, and this will kind of tie into some of our other stuff about Sarella Sand here. So Baelor Breakspear was he was next in line to be king. Right, Baelor Breakspear. He's a really good guy. You think about the Targaryens. They talk about it's a coin toss. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. He's on the really good side. He was next in line. He was going to be a great king.
Yes.
And then there ultimately what ends up happening to him is we get to the Hedge Knight, which is the first of the Dunk and Egg series, and Baelor Breakspear steps in to fight on the behalf of Sir Duncan the Tall in a trial of 7. It is an excellent story, and Ezra and I in our podcast encourage people to read it as much as possible because we think it's one of the best Game of Thrones stories, arcs that there is. He ends up dying in this combat, and he is actually slain by his brother, Prince Maekar Targaryen, who ends up going on to become king, and is the king. It is the father of Aegon V, Egg, and that's how that line transitions over to the Mad King and Rhaegar and all of that. So Baelor Breakspear was going to really unite the realm because the Dornish had not been really part of the realm since its existence, since Aegon the Conqueror took it over, and everybody felt he was really going to be that guy. Because he's Dornish, we now have that marriage alliance to come in here and unite it. So fast forward a little bit, Rhaegar Targaryen marries Elia Martell of Dorne. They have children, one of which who is Rhaenys Targaryen, their firstborn, the daughter. She has more Dornish features, and this is where we're going to talk a little bit about how she could be Sarella Sand, why Dorne would have a very strong vested interest in keeping her alive, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So the idea we're introducing then Sarella Sand, who is the fourth eldest daughter to bastard daughter, by the way, to Oberyn Martell, who was brother to Elia Martell. And again, as I said in our research, we're looking for someone, a character who is born around 280 AC, and Sarella Sand fit that. She's also we don't get much about her mother. We don't really it's not really detailed who her mother is. It's also really not necessarily known where Sarella Sand is, and we're going to come to that in part 3. But for right now, it appears that she's up to some game. She's doing something. Dorne Martell doesn't really know where she's at. So it's a character who kind of fits, right? We don't really get to interact with her. We don't hear people talk a lot about her, yet we know she's significant. And she fits the description. So she's described as having light brown skin, and she is very curious, a lot of curiosity. I think it's even noted that she's interested in Targaryen history, which is pretty interesting, and that she loves Old Town. So, yeah, there's a lot going on there, and we really are driving home the point that Dorne, again, that history connection that Sir Matt was making, and that if you were to come back and actually also look at Lemongate and different things and look at the association with Dorne and how they sympathize with the Targaryens, ironically, actually, after being, the one kingdom that defied Aegon's conquest and other Targaryens for so many years, these marriage alliances are important. And it's actually what Dorne Martell is trying to do at the end of this entire series. Quentin goes down to make an alliance. Ariana is making an alliance. So they're looking to gain power and influence. And so, yeah, it seems fitting, I guess, in that, they would be, as Sir Matt said, interested in the well-being of Elia Martell's children.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so, the bigger idea, I guess, the more commonly accepted idea is that possibly this character, Aegon Targaryen, who was over in Essos, a young griff, that somebody smuggled him out, be it Varys or somebody, so that the Targaryen line could continue. If you did that, also what we're saying here is, why not Rhaenys? Because, as you know, the Targaryens marry. You could then continue the line with just those two. If Robert Baratheon turns out to be a terrible king, if Tywin Lannister, you have to think about, during the sack of King's Landing, anything could have happened. I mean, they talk about in A Game of Thrones that all Ned Stark would have had to have done was step up to the throne, and it could have been his. He's there, right? I mean, he goes up, he finds Jaime Lannister sitting on there. I mean, it's possible that Ned Stark could have taken it. So it's really in a state of turmoil. So now Dorne, you got to remember, Dorne has always been kind of its own place. Even now, even when they're part of the Seven Kingdoms, they still really operate under their own rules, and they would have a very strong vested interest. And they're actually Rhaegar didn't have a lot of allies in Robert's rebellion, but Dorne was one of them. So Dorne would have a very strong vested interest in keeping a seat on the throne. That's something we see later when Tyrion decides to send Myrcella to Dorne. Hey, if we could get Dorne back in the fold, we could have a strong ally. That's during the War of the Five Kings, because having Dorne as an ally would be an enormous asset to us. They could help. They could come up. You have Renly and Stannis on opposing sides. That's when he's starting to talk about that. So Dorne would have a very strong reason in keeping Rhaenys Targaryen alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing too that's interesting, and the reason we tied Rhaenys Targaryen to Sarella Sand is because Sarella Sand's father, Oberyn Martell, was extremely close with Elia Martell. So I don't want to forget to mention that, because, it's actually hinted at that they were as close as Cersei and Jaime were to one another. And so that type of relationship is interesting. And also, it just sort of shows that he would very much care about helping make sure that her children were safe. And ironically, again, that being that Sarella Sand is born in 280 AC, similar looking. Not much is known about her mother, and I could totally see Oberyn kind of taking her in and under his wing. Now, part 3 takes just that statement that Rhaenys Targaryen is Sarella Sand, and we're literally going to go next level. So part 3, I think, is even more going to reinforce sort of why we think this is interesting. Okay, because right there we're looking at, well, they're born the same time, they look similar, and there's this Oberyn's relationship with Elia Martell is close, and that's really all you have in part 2. But once you get to part 3 and you look at Sarella Sand's character, it takes off from there, and who else has interacted with that individual.
Absolutely. So all right, and stay tuned, guys, for part 3 of this, and thank you for watching, and remember that the night is dark and full of terrors.